All right, let's talk about magnesium. It's one of those electrolytes that's so easy to overlook, but for any surgical patient, it is absolutely critical. Seriously, when this master regulator gets out of balance, it can cause total chaos in the body. So let's dive in. This quote right here, it's really what it's all about, isn't it? Being a great surgeon, a safe surgeon, isn't just about knowing stuff for an exam. It's about being able to see what's coming, to prevent a disaster before it ever happens. And trust me, understanding magnesium is a huge, huge part of that. I'm your guide, Dr. Maya, and today we're going to explore the kingdom of magnesium together. Think of it as this powerful, often forgotten ruler that keeps all of our body's energy factories up and running. But if you get it wrong, the entire kingdom of electrolytes can just fall into chaos. So our first stop, the Royal Vault. And listen, this is where it gets really interesting, because what I'm about to show you is probably the single most important thing to understand about magnesium. It's the reason why a really dangerous deficiency can be so easy to miss. Okay, just look at this. It's kind of wild when you see it laid out. A massive 99% of all the magnesium in our body is hidden away inside our cells, locked up in bones and tissues. That means only a tiny 1% is actually floating around in the blood where we can measure it. So what's the takeaway? It's simple. A normal blood level can be a complete lie, hiding a huge shortage deep inside the cells where it counts. All right, pop quiz time. Let's get those neurons firing. You've got 5 seconds on the clock. Ready? Where does most of our magnesium get reabsorbed in the kidney? Go. Time's up. The answer is the thick ascending limb. That's right, a huge 60 to 70% of it. And this is so important because it's different from other electrolytes like sodium. If you can just lock that fact away, you'll immediately understand why loop diuretics, which work right there, can cause such a massive and dangerous loss of magnesium. So now let's talk about what happens when that intracellular vault starts to run empty. Because this isn't just about a low number on a lab report you need to fix. No, this is a full-blown crisis. It's a domino effect that can take down other really important electrolytes with it. To really get a picture of this, my colleague Dr. Leo has this perfect analogy. He says to think of the magnesium inside our cells as a physical plug. It sits in this special potassium channel in the kidney called the ROMK channel. But when magnesium levels drop, that plug gets pulled out. And what happens? Potassium just starts pouring out into the urine like a broken fire hydrant. And that right there, that explains the absolute nightmare of refractory hypokalemia. That's when you're giving your patient bag after bag of potassium, but their level just won't come up. It's because you're pouring it into a leaky bucket. That channel is still wide open. So please remember this. If a patient's potassium just won't normalize, you have to check and fix their magnesium first. Period. Now, the really scary part is that this whole unplugged situation can show up right on the cardiac monitor. See, really low magnesium prolongs the QT interval, and that sets the stage for this absolutely lethal arrhythmia called torsades de points. You can see it right here, this characteristic twisting of the points. And the immediate life-saving treatment, it's always 2 grams of IV magnesium. It doesn't even matter what their last magnesium level was. You see torsades, you give magnesium. And it doesn't stop with potassium. My friend Dr. Sam explains this next part perfectly. It's the parathyroid paradox. Low magnesium throws calcium into chaos too. When it gets critically low, like less than 1, the parathyroid glands basically just shut down. They stop pumping out PTH. So now you've got another refractory problem. You can push all the calcium you want, but it's not going to stick until you fix the magnesium. Okay, so let's flip the coin here. What happens when there's too much magnesium? Well, here's the thing about that. This is almost always a trap we set for ourselves. High magnesium is usually iatrogenic, which, is just a fancy way of saying it's caused by something we did, by a medical treatment. And as Dr. Zara always says, the classic scenario is actually frighteningly simple. It's giving a totally common magnesium-containing laxative to a patient who has kidney failure. See, a healthy kidney can get rid of tons of extra magnesium, no problem. But a kidney that isn't working right, it just can't. And that one simple mistake can turn a harmless medicine into a deadly poison. Okay, another quick question for all you sharp surgeons out there. 5 seconds again, your patient is getting an IV magnesium drip. What is the very first clinical sign you'll see that tells you things are going south, that they're getting toxic? Think fast. The answer? Loss of deep tendon reflexes. That's it. At a level of just 4 to 6, those reflexes disappear. And that patellar reflex, the simple knee jerk, that's your sentinel. It is the canary in the coal mine. If that reflex is gone, you stop the magnesium immediately, because that is your final warning before the patient stops breathing and their heart stops beating. Okay, we've talked about the dangers, so now let's build the solutions. Let's walk through the clear, step-by-step plans that you need to have in your back pocket to manage these emergencies calmly and correctly every single time. For hypomagnesemia, low magnesium, your first step is always to check for life threats. Are they having seizures? Is there torsades on the monitor? If yes, you give 1 to 2 grams of magnesium IV and you give it fast over about 5 minutes. But for just routine replacement, the key is to go slow, like 1 gram an hour max. This gives it time to actually get into the cells. And you've got to be patient. Remember, since 99% of it is inside the cells, it can take 3 to 5 days to fully restock the tank. Now for hypermagnesia, high magnesium, step 1 is the most important. Stop giving it. Seems obvious, but you have to do it. Then immediately check that patellar reflex. If it's gone, or if there are any other signs of trouble, you give the antidote, which is IV calcium. Calcium acts as a direct antagonist right at the cell membrane, stabilizing everything. And then to actually get rid of the excess magnesium, you can use IV fluids and diuretics, or for really severe cases, they're going to need emergency dialysis. And hey, a quick but really important point about that calcium antidote. You've got 2 main choices. Calcium gluconate, that's your go-to, your workhorse. It's way safer if you're giving it through a peripheral IV. Then you have calcium chloride. That's the big gun. It's got 3 times more calcium, but it's really harsh on the veins, so you really want to give that through a central line, or, in a code situation. Okay, let's wrap up by locking in all this knowledge with a few super high-yield clinical pearls. These are the kinds of scenarios you're going to see on your exams. But more importantly, these are the things you'll see on the wards. This is how we prevent those disasters we talked about in the beginning. So picture this, classic scenario. You've got a patient with preeclampsia on a magnesium drip. The nurse calls you, says she's getting really lethargic and her reflexes are gone. What do? The answer is you act immediately. Stop the mag, give IV calcium. You have to remember, you're not just treating a lab value, you are actively stopping her from going into respiratory arrest. Okay, here's another tricky one. A malnourished patient starts on TPN. IV nutrition. And on day 2, they suddenly go into heart failure. What's going on? This is classic refeeding syndrome. The second you give them calories, a big insulin surge shoves phosphate, potassium, and magnesium into the cells, leaving almost none in the blood. The key here is not to react to the crisis, but to anticipate it. You have to replace these electrolytes proactively from the very first day. And let's finish up with 2 critical traps you absolutely want to avoid. First is the oxide trap. You'll see people give oral magnesium oxide all the time, but it's a mistake. It's barely absorbed and usually just causes diarrhea, which, ironically, makes the patient lose even more magnesium. So use the better forms like citrate or lactate. The second one is the anesthesia trap. High magnesium can make surgical paralytics up to 50% stronger. That's huge. It means the anesthesia team has to be watching nerve function like a hawk to make sure the patient isn't over-paralyzed. So look, if you take just one thing away from our whole journey today, please let it be this. Magnesium is the master gatekeeper. It has to be right for the other big players, like potassium and calcium, to behave properly. It really does control the gates. If you want more friendly exam stories with little surgeons like me, don't forget to like and subscribe. Let us know in the comments what we should tackle next.